address some outstanding motions, specifically motion numbers 4 and 5. On the agenda this morning is a joint presentation from the Eversource and Avangrid companies, followed by discussion and public comment. After the company's presentation, we will kick off with questions from PRS staff and then turn to any questions and comments from other stakeholders. We are live streaming today on our YouTube channel. We also have a court reporter with us. So as always, please make sure to avoid the chat, as that is not part of the official record of this proceeding. Any questions or comments that you may have, we ask that you verbalize at the appropriate time. Please also familiarize yourselves with the raise hand function under the reactions tab at the bottom of the screen, as we will turn to that raise hand function for the queue of questions following the presentation. I want to welcome everyone this morning. Happy Friday. We will go ahead and get started with the presentation. I'll ask Mr. Bumpin to pull up that presentation and turn the floor over to the Eversource and Avangrid teams.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Dan Trainer from Eversource. And we can start off by going to the next slide. Thank you, everyone. All right, so today in our presentation, we're going to discuss a couple different things. One is order number 10 from Docket 240501, which outlines the different options that have been proposed for the Connecticut Energy Assistance Payments, or CEAP, interacting with the new matching payment program, and what options there are for that to occur. And then it's order number 11, which is a variety of data reporting requirements, and the company's requirements to review those and propose to modify or discontinue those different reporting requirements. And there's different versions of discontinue because some orders are duplicative. There's some that is significant administrative burden, and then there's others that there's some conflicting directives. So we'll get into the review of those a little later on. Next slide, please. So this is a matrix of the four different options that have been proposed for incorporating CEAP with the MPP program. I'm going to review each of the options. So option 1 at the top, what this option does is anytime a customer gets CEAP applied to their electric or gas utility, it would in turn lower the customer's monthly payment for those that are enrolled on matching payment. For example, if a customer's normal monthly payment on the matching payment program is, say, $200, and they get $500 in CEAP for the season, the system would then take the $500 divided across a number of months and lower their monthly payments by, say, $25 or so, which would require the customer to pay $175 a month while on the MPP program. Obviously, it'd be easier for customers to afford those payments. Any lower payments are easier for customers to afford, and it really, amplifies the value of getting CEAP. The customers are essentially getting a benefit for multiple months in a row, in the form of a lower monthly payment. On the downside of that is customers will take longer to eliminate their past due balance. Because of the lower payment and the way the matching payment program works, where it matches any payment a customer makes as well as the CEAP payment, it would take them a longer period of time to eliminate their entire past due balance. For Eversource, our cost to make this change is about $100,000, and it would take about 20 weeks or so to implement that once we have a team stood up and ready to go. And this is Avangrid's current method of that's how their system works today. So there would be no changes on the Avangrid side.
Good morning. This is Lisa Rosso with Avangrid. We had chosen this way for both to allow the customer, it'll be a more affordable payment plan for them throughout their MPP, as well as the incentive to get SEEP, because it helps them immediately to lower their payment, as well as since we're matching it, the SEEP amount, it reduces, of course, their arrears. So that's like a double bonus.
Thanks, Lisa. For option two, it's a little different, and this is what Eversource's current process is today, where if a SEEP payment comes in to customers that are enrolled on MPP, it acts like a customer overpayment, meaning it would eliminate future payments that are due. So if the customer's payment is $200, their monthly payment's $200, and they get a $600 energy assistance payment, it would eliminate the requirement for a customer to pay their monthly payment over the next 3 months. The benefit of this is it really provides that targeted relief during the winter season when the SEEP payments come in, when customers tend to need it the most. On the downside, it doesn't encourage consistent payment behavior. Customers have essentially, in that example, 3 months off of making payments, and it might be a little difficult for them to restart making payments once their SEEP money has run out. And this again could delay or reduce arrears forgiveness. They'll still get the match on the SEEP when it posts, but those elimination of the 3 months of payments would extend the customer's time to eliminate their full past due balance. And then since it's Eversource's current process, there's no cost for us. But I'll turn it over to Lisa to talk about the Avangrid piece.
Yes, for Avangrid, this would be our highest cost alternative option for us. It'd be, give or take $50,000 and take approximately 15 weeks to make these changes.
Thanks, Lisa. Moving to option three, applying the SEEP to one monthly payment and under new MPP, and then applying the excess funds to the arrearage. So this is a little bit of option two, but it's just 1 month. It gives customers 1 month off of payments during that winter heating season, and then applies the rest to the past due balance. So in this situation, they do get that targeted relief, but it's not as long as option two potentially could be. It goes into reducing the arrears. This one could be difficult for customers to understand. When they see on their bill, they might think, well, I have a $600 SEEP payment. Why am I only getting 1 month off? So it seems like there could be some customer confusion there. For Eversource, this is a very complex change to our system. The cost is $1.9 million, much more expensive than option one. It's and for customer confusion, we think there would be some customer confusion there. And then for Avangrid, Lisa?
For Avangrid, it would be a cost of $30,000 in order to make this change. And again, we don't feel like this is the most advantageous for the customer. Like Dan said, a little confusing to see it on the bill. Plus if they're not making a payment, they're missing out on the match. Whereas option one, you get a match plus you're getting your full SEEP on your arrears.
Thanks, Lisa. Moving to option four, which is apply the entire SEEP award to the customer's balance. This doesn't eliminate or reduce any current payments that the customer is paying. So the challenge with that we see with that is there's reduced, or I'm not going to say no incentive to apply for SEEP, but there's limited incentive in the near term for a customer who's looking for the assistance in the winter time to apply for that SEEP, since there's no kind of immediate benefit for that customer. And again, for Eversource, this is a very costly option, also 1.9 million to implement due to the complex coding changes in the system to um, meet the requirements of this option.
And for Avangrid, it's about give or take 15,000 to make this change. But again, we feel like it doesn't really incentivize a person to go and apply for a seat because, yes, if they're looking at their arrears, but they're always looking to see, what can they do to help them right now.
Thanks, Lisa. And we have the star on option one, kind of thinking that that option is the best of both worlds. One, it's not as costly as some of the other options when you consider both Avangrid's cost and Eversource's cost. And two, it's customers are used to this, especially the customers that have participated in the MPP program for many years. This is how the SEEP was incorporated into the payments throughout that program. So that's why in our filings we proposed option one. And just one comment before we go on to the data reporting, which is obviously a totally separate topic. Would you like us to take questions on this first before we switch over to the next one, or would we want to go through the entire presentation with both SEEP options and data reporting and then do questions? I know these topics are just kind of very different.
Yes, I appreciate the question. Let me check with Ms. Dumaine. Do you have your questions broken out in that way?
Yes, I think we could do that if that helps the flow of the conversation, but we're also happy to wait to the end. We defer to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Dumaine. Why don't you go ahead and ask the questions on this topic, please?
Okay, well, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Julia Dumaine with Connecticut Pura. I had actually, the only other thing I'll add is that I had actually put together, Steph had put together a few slides to help us formulate our questions and to have a conversation. So now that I'm actually saying that, maybe
Yeah.
I take back my stance. We just had put together a couple slides to help us facilitate the conversation and make sure that we're all on the same page. So perhaps it would be better to allow Mr. Trainer to finish his slide deck first, and then I can share my screen.
Thank you. Okay, with that, Mr. Trainer, Ms. Rosso, if you could just finish the presentation, please.
Great, thank you. Next slide, please. Thank you. So moving into the data reporting requirements. Next slide, please. So this is just kind of a summary of what we were required to do. There's a lot of orders around this going back in a couple different dockets, but basically what we did is we looked at all of the outstanding orders from various dockets and what we're required to report, and are those requirements and are those orders still kind of applicable today? Should we change some? Should we eliminate some? So this is kind of outlining what this is. So we were proposing to continue, modify, or discontinue. In this discussion, we're going to look at the ones we're modifying or discontinuing. If it's not on here, then we've proposing to continue those reports. And then we're going to provide a summary over on the next slide, please. So this is a summary of our filing. We recently made separated into different categories. So we looked at the ones that we think we should modify, that we still think there's some value there. There's 12 orders that we're proposing to modify, and we have them listed over on the right-hand side. They're in dockets 210701 and 200704. We're not going to go through every single one of those orders. We do list them in the appendix. We'll go over some examples of each one of these categories. And then there's discontinue, and there's different flavors of discontinue. We propose to discontinue because they're duplicative, because there's a lot of administrative burden. They're very complex and time consuming. to look at and to put together. And then there's some that there's conflicting directives between one docket and another docket, and we'll get into an example of that. Next slide, please. Here's an example of one we'd like to modify. So these are orders 1 and 3 in docket 200704. And this might be a little small to read, but basically both of these orders are asking for reporting on below budget worksheets for both electric and gas. So we know that a couple years ago, prior to the low income discount rate, or at the same time the low income discount rate was implemented from the electric side, the below budget worksheet was the below budget payment was eliminated. So the proposal here is to only include the gas companies in this modification, because electric, it's going to be 0, and it has been 0 for the past year or so. So that's our proposal on this one. I'll just eliminate the requirement to show electric and include just the gas below budget payment information. Next slide, please. And then here's an example of a duplicative one. This one, we would discontinue the reporting. This particular report, order 61 in docket 210701, is looking for information on disconnections outside of the winter moratorium. So this one's duplicative because we actually also report very similar information in order 50 on service terminations as well. And order 50 is an annual report. So it's very similar reporting. So this one we would consider duplicative and just do order 50 on the annual basis. Next slide. An example of one to reduce the administrative burden. This is order 47 in docket 210701. And this one is looking for, it's related to customers receiving termination notices and their behavior, what happens after termination notice is received, or the final notice is received. How many of them paid or go on arrangements or go on a program, or ultimately get disconnected. There's a very significant amount of information here. And instead of reporting on a monthly basis, we're proposing to discontinue the monthly and reporting it annually in January, and provide 12 months worth of data here versus the monthly cadence we're reporting today. Next slide, please. And an example that resolves conflicting directives. So this is order 11 in 200704, where it's requiring outbound calling campaigns to talk about financial hardship protection, MPP. And the reason why we would discontinue this is because in docket 240501, it approved Eversource's communication plan, which ceased outbound calling because we do very limited outbound calling at this point due to scamming risk. More people are getting caught by scams, and we're trying to do as the least amount of outbound calling possible here. So that's an example of the conflicting directives. Next slide, please. Might be it. Yep. And in the appendix, there we categorize all the different reports into the different categories that we had just talked about. So I'm not going to go through every single order that's out there, but all the ones that are modified, discontinue either because they're duplicative or there's a significant administrative burden or resolving conflicting directives are in the appendix in each of those categories. That's all I have for today.
Okay, thank you very much for that presentation. Then I will turn it over to Ms. Dumaine, and it sounds like we want to pull up a separate slide deck.
Yes. Thank you. Okay. All right. Very good. Can everyone see this? Oops. Hate when that happens. Please hold. One day I'll get this right. All right. That should work. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Julia Dumaine, Connecticut PURA. Thank you very much for the presentation and for walking us through your proposal. In an effort to ensure that we understand exactly how SEEP is being applied, I appreciate, Mr. Trainer, that you sort of referenced a brief example of how it would be applied under the recommended proposal from the companies. But we wanted to just make sure that we're level setting and put it in getting exactly what we're understanding on paper and then clarifying and making sure that we are all in agreement that that's what the proposal is. So just as a refresher, Public Act 23-102 removed the requirement to reduce a customer's payment by the anticipated SEEP benefit, but it did add a requirement that each company shall reduce a customer's arrearage balance by an amount equal to the customer's monthly payment under MPP and the SEEP received by that customer. So the proposal in motion number 39 recommends using Avangrid's current approach as discussed. We pulled this equation from motion 7 from last year, but so the last 12 months of kilowatt hour usage and standards multiplied by the standard service rate at the time of enrollment, less the LIDAR, less the SEEP when known, divided by 12. Is that accurate still?
Hi, Kathy Wasselneck for Avangrid. Yes, that is still an accurate calculation.
Okay. So I learn best when I see things applied in with real numbers. So I attempted to put together a hypothetical situation. Please correct me if this is not realistic at all, but under a hypothetical example application, let's say a customer has a $150 monthly payment worth of kilowatt hours at rates at time of enrollment. Let's also say they qualify for a 5% LIDAR under the new 5-tier LIDAR structure, and that they've received a $250 SEEP and that they have $1,000 in arrearages. Okay, so when I initially started thinking through this, the calculation I came up with was that this would result in a $121.66 monthly payment for a customer under MPP. And again, by statute, the arrearage forgiveness needs to equal the customer's MPP and SEEP when received. So where we are just wanting to clarify is then what is happening at this point. And I think you did start to clarify it, but I think it would be helpful for us to understand which of the following, if any of these 4 application scenarios is occurring. So the first is the customer paying $121.66 per month. Then the payment towards the arrearage is SEEP divided by 12. And the utility is then also matching the MPP and the SEEP divided by 12. So towards the arrearage. In scenario B, again, customer has the same payment. Is the SEEP being paid upfront as a lump sum towards the arrearage? And then the utility is matching that lump sum. And then the MPP payment match. Scenario C, again, $250 paid upfront, but the utility is only matching the MPP because the SEEP is being accounted for in the customer's monthly payment. And then I actually added scenario D during Mr. Trainer's presentation because I think this is what he said, and I just want to clarify. The SEEP amount actually wouldn't be applied to the numerator in the equation. It would be applied after towards the customer's monthly payment divided by a certain number of months. In this case, I wasn't clear about how many months it would be divided by. And then the SEEP is not being, because it's being accounted for there, it's not necessarily being paid down in the arrearage amount, but is then being matched by the company. So I apologize for the confusion. I am grateful for the opportunity to clarify this and appreciate you walking us through how this is actually being applied.
All right, so let me take a shot at it. So scenario A, the customer payment, I believe you have correct there at 121, and in real life it would round up to 125, so it's easier for customers. But using this example here, the 121.66 is the correct customer payment, which basically takes the 250 divided by 12, reduces it from the original 150, right? That's how the math worked out there. Okay. If Eversource did option one, the SEEP, when in every scenario, when the SEEP posts, it's matched at that point. The match isn't spread out over the 12 months, it's matched right away. Avangrid, is that the way it works for you, Lisa or Kathy? Is it matched right away?
Yes, so once we know of the SEEP, it's in the calculation, so that's how we got to the budget amount. But once the SEEP posts to the customer's account, it is matched right away. So if we receive it on February 15th, we match it on February 15th.
As a lump sum.
As a lump sum, yes.
Thank you. Okay.
Also,
Yeah.
just to correct, the customer's 150 payment has already taken into account their LIDR. So the LIDR wouldn't be taken out again. So when we've calculated their MPP payment, that's already taken into consideration, whatever their
Okay.
LIDR is.
Okay. So realistically, the 150 times 0.05 times 12 would not.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and it may not be 12. It depends on when you actually get the money. It could be 10 months. You know, really that timing can be different depending as well.
But for purposes of calculating a customer's monthly payment, it's not always divided by 12. It's divided.
However many months they have left.
Okay.
If it's helpful, and this is Jess Kane with Eversource. So I think there are two things, and I think both companies currently are providing the arrears forgiveness for SEEP perfectly in compliance. Like that part kind of isn't in debate. It's so when either one of us receive a SEEP payment for arrears forgiveness, it's matched, just like a normal customer payment. Both of us, we're good there. The part about the column that says customer payment, and we like train ourselves to say it's the customer's required monthly payment amount. It's not actually their payment yet, like because they might not pay, right? So it's the customer's required monthly payment amount. And so when you receive SEEP, then one thing already happens, which is it provides the arrears forgiveness. The scenarios we went through were, in addition to providing the arrears forgiveness, how do we want SEEP to modify the monthly required payment amount? And I think that's what's up for debate. And it's because old MPP, I think, did it the way that Avangrid did it currently. And we just interpreted the statutes in different ways on what we should consider with SEEP. I don't know if that's helpful or not, but
I appreciate that. Thank you. No, that is, I think, helpful. And the purpose of clarifying the statute was to help us understand the approach here and just understanding, the decision-making process and how it's being applied. So thank you.
And thank you, Mr. Maine. I do want to bring us back to that statute just so we're all on the same page. In the words in the statute, and one big difference between the old MPP and new MPP is old MPP, we used to look at the anticipated SEEP. So if customers received SEEP last year, we would assume they would receive SEEP again this year and calculate that into their payment at the beginning of the season. New MPP, we would only be doing that once the information about SEEP is known. Once they're awarded the SEEP, essentially. So that's a big difference between old MPP and new MPP. And Kathy, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just want to clarify. So our calculation, we always do divide by 12. It's just a matter of how many months they have that they're going to end up being enrolled in MPP based on the whole fact that we can now enroll at any time of year, and Avangrid has in place that we renew everybody on November 1st. So that's where Lisa may have gotten a little confused when she answered to that the calculation takes in the full 12 months, but they may only have 8 months left before they'll get renewed again.
Correct. That's what I meant. Yeah.
Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
So just to kind of close out scenario A. So the customer payment amount, that's calculated correctly. The SEEP, the difference between what's on the screen and what actually would happen is it's all paid up front. Once the SEEP is received, the match is there. So then the utility match, assuming we matched it as soon as it came in, would be whatever their monthly payment is. Whatever they paid that month, we would match that. And in the month they paid the SEEP, it would be their monthly payment that they made plus the SEEP that came in.
Okay.
In scenario B, the customer's monthly payment is not going to be the $121.66. It's whatever their normal monthly required payment is without reducing it by the SEEP amount. So the receiving SEEP or not doesn't change their monthly payment amount. So if we assume the 150 is already discounted, that's going to be their monthly payment. So if they get the $250 in SEEP in this example, it's going to match it right away, and it's going to reduce or eliminate their next month's payment because their 150 is less than the 250 they received. So the first month they owe $0 once the SEEP payment posts. The second month they would owe $100 because that's what's remaining out of that SEEP bucket. $100. $100 would be paid towards their payment. They would owe $50. Excuse me.
Okay. And just to clarify, the purpose of this table was these were the different scenarios that we were trying to think through what would actually be happening. So they're not
I
to be
was assuming they aligned
like,
with the 4 options.
right. We're trying to understand which
okay.
of these is actually what is happening. So just so I understand. So sorry, that wasn't clear. That's what you're saying sounds like is aligned with what you described in your presentation. Is that correct?
Yes, I was assuming scenario B went with option 2.
I apologize. No. This is about this. That was confusing nomenclature on my part.
Okay.
No, these are meant to just be. We were trying to understand what the different potential ways this is being actually applied is. So it sounds like scenario B is what is happening under the motion number 39 proposal and the way that Avangrid has been approaching it. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay,
Each
that's
scenario
very helpful. Thank you.
is what we're currently doing, Dan, right? But we give you
this
arrears.
is different. This is different interpretations of how scenario or option 1 could work.
Yes.
That
This
Ms. Domingue is trying to figure out in option 1, how is it actually working? Is it scenario A, B, C, or D?
Okay, versus what we're doing, like today, what we're doing for arrears forgiveness is if the customer pays $121 and they get $250 in SEEP, we match them immediately. So the matching part is already happening, and that's not one of the proposals.
Right.
Nothing about matching is in the proposals. Okay.
Correct. Yeah, that was what I was trying to clarify with that. We're not questioning that part. I'm just trying to understand at what point under the proposal that Avangrid is currently using and that Eversource is proposing to match under motion 39. We're just trying to make sure we understand exactly what is happening when the SEEP is received and how it's being accounted for in the customer's monthly payment, in the match, and what happens with the actual SEEP amount. So apologies for the confusion there. Yes, these are not meant to correspond to the proposal or to the table of options highlighted in last year's final decision or in the company's motion. These are meant to focus specifically on option 1, which is the recommended option by the companies. Does that help clarify?
Thank you for the
everything?
clarification. Yes. So scenario B is how it works.
Okay, thank you. So now I'm just going to ask a series of just clarifying questions. They may have already been addressed, but just to make sure that we have it crystal clear. So the customer's monthly payment is when the customer pays that is being applied only to their actual monthly bill cost, correct?
Can you say that again, please?
Yeah.
I think
So
I get it.
the customer's monthly payment arrangement, the 121, is being applied only to their monthly bill cost, correct?
So I know it does get confusing. You're not alone in this. So when we talk about it between ourselves, but so there's what they're actually billed, which has nothing to do with their payment amount, right? Those are the real charges, which are separate. Their required monthly payment amount. So if a customer pays, in this case, it's $121. So if the customer pays their required monthly payment amount, if they make that payment, it satisfies 2 things. 1, it satisfies them as successful that month on making their MPP amount, so they stay on MPP. And 2, it will match that payment amount. It'll reduce $121 off their arrears. So it has both effects, down to a 0 balance. It doesn't go below that. And so for that reason, it's like the lower the monthly payment amount, that was the negative on then the lower the match. And so that's the trade-off, right? Because the less you pay, the less is matched. So
that's great. That's exactly what I needed. Thank you. So then the company's portion is the match that occurs when the customer successfully makes their required monthly payment amount. And that is what is going towards the arrearage.
Either both the customer's payment and if they get SEEP. If they get SEEP, both of those
Right.
things are going to get the arrears forgiveness. Yep.
Great. Okay. One thing we just want to clarify is if the customer's monthly required payment is less than their actual monthly bill in reality, does that mean that their arrearage will keep increasing if their actual monthly bill is higher?
Yep.
Okay.
In short, yes. And that's why we have the auto reconciliations, the auto review and reconciliation to kind of just like budget billing. If it goes outside of a tolerance, you don't want to do average monthly amount changes, but if it goes outside of certain tolerances, then we would automatically review and adjust the required monthly payment amount with a goal of not ending up with a big credit or debit at the completion of the matching payment program. Dan, let me know if I got that right.
Yeah, you got that right, Jess. It happens every 6 months on MPP. So it'll look and find a new average. And if it goes up or down, it'll adjust it accordingly.
There could be times where their payment is higher than their monthly bill, depending on the season. And, maybe we have a cool summer, so they're not using air conditioning. And so their monthly bill is lower, but their payment is still, say, the 121. So that, because the monthly payment is an average. It's taking all of the
Right.
bills and averaging them out. So there could be times where their monthly bill is lower, but then they're just putting all that more on their arrears. So these payments really, once they are no longer on MPP and say that they end up with a zero balance, the following year, they could go on a regular budget, and this same amount that was their MPP amount could still be their budget amount. So that helps them to, make a budget themselves and continue to pay and no longer be in arrears though.
And Lisa's right, so some months, since it's an average, some months it'll be higher or lower than the current month's billed charges, but it's always less than their total bill. Their total past due balance
Correct.
includes everything. So if
Right.
they're not on MPP, then they'll see the whatever the total bill will show the total amount they owe. Good clarifications.
Great, thank you so much. I think next question is, if someone fails out of their MPP plan, then what will happen to the remainder of their SEEP award under the option 1 proposed by the utilities?
So the SEEP award, when it comes in, is applied right away. So they don't like lose any benefit. It's still, if they get in this case, 250, it's applied to their account. They don't lose it. What happens when you fall off of MPP is the total amount becomes due, or the delinquent amount becomes due, and your monthly payment is essentially whatever your bill is at the time. That's the required monthly payment. They don't lose anything besides the benefits of MPP when they fall off.
Right. We still match the SEEP.
Yeah.
They're just losing us matching their payment.
Thank you. That's very helpful. I think those are all of my questions, Madam Chair. I believe authority staff have continued questions, though.
Thank you. So we're going to turn to Ms. Bygrass, and then if others want to follow Attorney Wheel's lead and get into the queue by using the raise hand function, we will turn to stakeholder questions following Ms. Bygrass.
Great, thank you so much. Good morning. Thank you to the companies for your presentation and for very carefully walking us through the proposal this morning. We really appreciate it. So first, I just wanted to clarify. So for proposal for option number 1 under the company's proposal, given that SEEP and the company's match of the SEEP award is being applied at one time, I'm just wondering if the companies can clarify the reasoning behind then lowering the the customer's monthly payment by 1/12 of the SEEP amount. So my sense is that the reasoning behind it is to acknowledge that the customer's arrearage is reduced, and therefore their monthly payment can be reduced, and then also provide them a little bit of assistance in paying their bill, while they're paying their MPP amount. But I'm just wondering if you could provide a little bit more clarity as to that.
Yeah, so the reason that we are incorporating the SEEP into the payment in one way or another is, I think in one of the slides Ms. Dumaine had showed, it showed the requirements in PA 23-102 to incorporate SEEP into the customer's monthly payment. So in some way it needs to be incorporated somehow. There's different ways to do that, as we can see. But it does need to be incorporated in some form or fashion. So that's why with option 1, reducing the customer's payment by 1/12 or a little bit every month, it's going to provide customers some benefit on that.
That's very helpful. Thank you. And I just wanted to clarify on one statement that was made earlier. So if a customer receives their SEAP award when there's only about 8 months left on their MPP arrangement, will the SEAP award then be divided by 8 in order to be included in the remaining payments that are required, or will it be divided by 12?
The calculation doesn't change, so it's always going to be, the budget calculation is always going to be divided by 12.
Okay, thank you. So essentially a customer has 8 months left, but the amount of the SEAP award that's reduced from their monthly payment is still going to be 1/12.
1/12, yes.
Okay.
Because the whole budget is based on 12 months of usage, regardless of how many months they have left to be enrolled.
So
Okay.
that their payment for like a remainder of 8 months will be reduced a little bit greater, really, because they don't only have going over 8 months versus 12.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thanks. And as Ms. Dumaine was asking about earlier, so if the customer's reduced MPP payment is less than their actual monthly bill amount, is there, I guess, a chance that the amount, some portion of the company's match or the SEAP award or SEAP match, et cetera, is being applied actually to that customer's actual monthly bill versus the arrearage?
Well, if they get close enough that their arrearage is almost gone, it would be towards the end of their plan, most likely, unless, of course, they had a drastic reduction. But there again, that's why every 6 months we're doing that recalculation to do an adjustment depending, on usage, because you never know, right? Between whether it's really warm or really cold, depending, it's not factual that your usage year after year after year is going to be exactly the same. So that's why we're doing the recalculation. But towards the end of their plan, it could, because that's when they may end the plan maybe in 10 months because they've reduced their usage so much. And even though we've done the recalculation twice, they still have reduced it so much that they could end up not owing anything at that point and be successful and be all done with it.
I could offer as well, Ms. Vigress, to that question. So a few of the attributes that are brand new with new MPP are, there's no longer a 12-month period. So you can stay on MPP until you either fully pay off your past due balance or your financial hardship expires. But any payments you make while on MPP will always apply to the arrears you had at the time that you enrolled and not apply to it's going to pay that down first. And then once your arrears are done, you're off the program. So then it shouldn't be hitting new charges while you're on the program. Dan, did I get that wrong?
No,
I
because it has to do with like that monthly payment amount that we keep talking about. Because essentially the goal of creating that monthly payment amount is to, in a perfect world, over 12 months, the customer's payments would equal what they actually used during that 12 months. Not even talking about the past due balance. The monthly payment should equal what they actually use. We know that doesn't happen. There's seasonal changes, usage goes up and down, etc. And that's why when Lisa said we do that 6-month review to increase or decrease that amount based on everything that's changed over the last 6 months. But when the customer does get those matches, when they make those monthly payments, and if that monthly payment is taking care of their 12-month average, they wouldn't have any more delinquent balance because they've made their payments and then they're getting the match. So that delinquent balance is always going to be reducing unless something drastic changes with their usage. like they install electric heat or something like that, and something significant changes. But again, that'll be caught in the 6-month review.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that clarification. So I have some questions about the analysis of the ongoing orders and requirements. So Robin, I'm wondering if you could bring the company's presentation back up on the screen. Perfect. And then move to slide number 13. Perfect, thank you. So I know this is small, but in the company's proposal, one of the orders that the companies are proposing to modify is order number 48 from docket number 210701. And the rationale that is given says that the companies are proposing to remove items A and B, which is looking at the number of transition/soft termination letters and some of the resulting customer behaviors. And I'm wondering if the companies can provide a little bit more information on why they are proposing to remove these items in the data reporting.
Yeah, absolutely. So good question. In this report, we look at it. It's also one of the ones we use as an example. In A and B, the transition letter and soft termination letters were just used coming out of the COVID disconnect moratorium. That's not a normal part of the noticing process. It was an additional notification, one-time notification used for when non-hardship customers moratorium expired. We sent these out maybe 30 days in advance. I don't recall exactly the timing, but it was a one-time thing. Then they would get the regular traditional disconnect notice and the final notice before disconnection. Then once for hardship customers, before the moratorium expired in May 2024, 30 days or some period of time before that, transition letters were sent out on a one-time basis to those customers, basically trying to get customers to enter into, at the time, New Start, MPP, payment plan, etc. So those are no longer used. It was a one-time thing, and there's nothing to report on essentially for those two items.
Perfect. That's very helpful. Thank you. So, Robin, could you move to page 15 or slide 15? Great. So now looking at the bottom of this slide, so order number 21 from docket number 200704. The companies are proposing to modify this order, and part of the rationale is that the home energy solutions income eligible assessments are performed on a 6-year schedule. And I'm wondering if the companies can provide just a little bit more information about that and why that would require modifying this order.
Dan, this is Teresa. I probably can take this
Thank you,
one.
Teresa
Washington from Eversource. You're welcome. So for this one, and especially the time of year that this was being reported on, looking back at now that the home energy solutions income eligible, they're doing a 6-year look back as far as when, if a customer is getting that assessment completed, they could have one every, I think, 3 years now that they changed it to a 6-year time frame versus 3 years. The MPP and the participation, I mean, as we see changes, especially to the program and the eligibility, and it's comparing a very different time frame. We're talking about financial hardship customers on this program, and we're also using the MPP data that's from a full year of participation. So you're looking at end of year that we report on. I think it's order number 11 from maybe 210701. And that takes a full year from the previous hardship year for MPP. So the look back, not sure what we might fully see as far as comparing very different timeframes, especially to continue to go back 6 years and look at participation. So 6 years versus a current year of MPP may not be the best assessment of that. I'm not sure if anybody else on the team has anything to add, but that's just looking at modifying that. In the recent filing, we did the 6 years based on the changes, but want to
So
make sure
you
that
would mean
we're
like if there are 100 customers who participated on MPP, how many of those have benefited and participated from HES-IE in the last 6 years? Because they can't enroll in HES-IE more than once every 6 years. So you
Correct.
just each year look at what number, percentage. You could also look at the delta from the prior year, but it's not, they can't enroll in it each year. So otherwise it would just not be useful information.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So to clarify, are the companies proposing that the order be modified to look at maybe the past year of MPP participants and how many of them participated in the Home Energy Solutions Income Eligible Program over the past 6 years? Is that the proposal?
Yes.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that. All right, so can my last question move to slide 22? Great, so oh yes, okay, so the second line on this slide is order number 35 from docket number 230501, which talks about the payment plan calculator and providing the number of customers that use that calculator. So my understanding is that this calculator is a customer-facing tool that is available on the company's websites that the customers can use to calculate their potential payment under a payment arrangement program and then enroll on a flexible payment arrangement program. So the company's proposal is to say the companies already provide the number of customers that are participating in flexible payment plans, so this is duplicative. I am wondering, to me, those seem like two different numbers, in that I'm assuming some customers enroll on flexible payment plans through different mechanisms, through customer service representatives or community action agencies or however. So can the companies provide a little bit more detail on kind of what this data is collecting, and if every single person that signs up for a flexible payment plan is someone who used the company's website calculator?
Yeah, that's a good question. On this one, so we have two different payment plan calculators, an internal and an external. So either way, a customer has to go through, whether it's a CSR or external, they go through essentially the same tool, which is the payment plan calculator. So in order 52, it doesn't call out the number of customers who went to that external payment plan calculator and entered into an arrangement. It has the total number of customers that entered into a flexible payment plan, which either went through the internal or external payment plan calculator.
So Dan, and we'll call that, the external one is eversource.com. So
Yeah.
that's that. So can we use order number 52 to just to your point, Ms. Vigrass, to say, it already says here's how many you signed up for flexible payment plans. Within that, can we split out who did it via the web, who did it via CSR, or via our CSR? I don't know if we already measure how many, I think we already measure differently, like how the community action agencies enroll people. But usually that's in a matching payment.
Yeah, that's matching payment. Clerk.
Yeah. So if that's it, but so we could, so if we use, it'll help a little bit the administrative burden of just doing it in order number 52, where flexible payment plans are already hit. And we could say, here's what's on eversource.com versus, and Avangrid could say the same for their web. What's done on the web versus via a CSR.
Okay, perfect. So just to clarify, the companies have the ability to calculate specifically the number of customers that are using the external payment calculator.
Yep. It's basically eversource.com. The brain behind it, we probably caused some confusion by calling it a payment plan calculator. The brain behind that Eversource logon is that, but it's just on the web payment plan versus via CSR.
Great, thank you. And I just want to confirm with Avangrid, is that the same?
Correct, yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Those are all of my questions.
Thank you. Then I'll turn to Attorney Wheel, please.
Thank you. Good morning still. Tom Wheel from the Office of Consumer Counsel. I have a couple of questions, and the Consumer Counsel, Claire Coleman, also has some. Also, I just want to embarrass our new legal intern, Rory Blevio, who's on the line. It's his very first day. He has no idea that I was about to say his name on the record. He's probably terrified. So it's one of the perks of the job. I have a question for Mr. Trainer. It's a silly question. I'm pretty sure I already know the answer, but you were giving an example, I think, during your presentation of, you said that I think the first option, actually, I think that the general hypothetical you were using for all the options was someone with a $200 bill receiving a $600 SEEP payment. So when you were talking about the customer receiving those payments over the next 3 months, was that just specific to that hypothetical?
Yeah, that was specific to option 2. Because if they receive the $600 today, that $200 monthly payment they would be required to pay would be essentially eliminated for the next 3 months in option 2.
Okay. Yep. Thanks. My next question is for Avangrid. For option 2, I was just curious, given Eversource's framing of option 2 as my understanding, and Eversource can correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that option 2 for Eversource works the same way as an overpayment works. So I was just curious if Avangrid's current overpayment process is the same, absent the, forget about MPP or even hardship customers for a second. If a customer overpays, does it work similarly where that overpayment sort of acts as a credit that's used against future bills until that credit is dissolved?
Yes. So you mean like a regular customer have their monthly bill and it's say $100 and they pay $200 and then they get their next bill and it's only $90. Yes, they wouldn't have to make any payment and they'd still have another $10 towards their next one.
Right. Okay.
Yes.
So I'm just curious about the cost, like the
because this is
cost
it's very
adjustment
different because we're talking about a payment plan, a budget, and adjusting it to recognize it doesn't need a payment because an actual bill is a separate identity to a payment plan or a budget or MPP. So they're two separate things in the billing system. So we would have to reprogram just the MPP to say, and not the bill part of it, just to say, okay, we're going to take this $600 and we're not going to require a payment.
Okay, thanks. And sorry for the ping ponging, but
No, it's okay. It's a fair question.
And for Eversource, when that was set, because that's their current process, did it require like separate programming in the same way when you set that up?
Yeah, there was programming as part of the implementation to implement MPP as a whole to treat the SEEP payments in that manner.
Okay, thanks. And while I'm on you, Mr. Trainer, I heard you say during the presentation that when you're explaining this kind of star on option one, that that it's not as costly as other options. I just wanted to make sure, don't want to be argumentative at all, but I want to make sure I understood, because it looked like option one would be $100,000 for Eversource and no additional cost for Avangrid. Option two would be a total of 50,000 additional costs for Avangrid. So isn't it true that in the aggregate, option two is ultimately less costly?
That's correct. I may have been speaking just for Eversource at that point in time, but yes, that is correct. So in totality, the cheapest one is option two.
Okay. I also want to be clear that I was honestly just asking that for clarification. I don't want to suggest that question had nothing to do with the substance or preference of any option. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't missing another cost on option two.
No, we're just saying specifically for Avangrid to make the change.
Yep. Okay.
And
Costly for us.
Mr. Wheel, what it could be, I know this is definitely like not in the scripted plan today, but I mean, but one of the benefits of having it designed two different ways for a period of time is it gives us like a test group on like which way works better for which reason, because we don't know, right? But we know for sure there are costs to make them the same. We don't know which one will be more successful in fully eliminating arrears. Well, it's reasonable to assume that the one that lowers the monthly payment amount would keep people on it longer. So, but that is
Yeah, we very much appreciate that, because we also don't know. I mean, this isn't. I mean, totally agree. This is not like there isn't really a clear, obvious answer for how to treat this. So I find it really helpful to have this. I'm looking right now at the slide 3 on the company's presentation. It's helpful to have like the pros and cons and everything laid out. So we appreciate that. I think I have a couple of questions about the reporting requirements, but I think my last question about this is related to the authority staff's slide deck, which we don't need to put on the screen, I don't think, but is Avangrid, maybe it'd be helpful for Avangrid to reference it to answer this question. Let me know. Is Avangrid currently doing scenario A that was on that screen? I mean, my understanding was that the scenarios from authority staff's presentations were different scenarios for how to implement what's called option one on the company, which is what Avangrid's current system is, but I just wasn't sure which scenario of option one matches Avangrid's current process.
Option
Slide
B.
again. Yeah.
I think it was
Slide
option
again?
B.
Okay, so that would be scenario B.
I'm sorry, yes.
Okay.
Scenario B matches Avangrid's option one
Okay.
process, yes.
Okay. Sorry, I had one other question for Mr. Trainer. You had mentioned that the old MPP that worked, that the receipt of SEEP, the anticipated receipt of SEEP was the way MPP was calculated. And I was curious, if there had been conversation like in the company and I apologize that our in-house expert on these issues, Attorney White, isn't on the call right now, because I'm sure she can answer this question. I don't know whether those conversations happened in the dockets or internally about the kind of and this also isn't a legal question, but the statutory language, which does the applicable statute says that the anticipated level of SEEP is supposed to be calculated in the arrearage payment. I was just curious if that move from the model where the expectation of SEEP moving forward was calculated, the shift away from that, if there was like discussion about the alignment with that statute.
So when we did have discussions around that, the anticipated SEEP is no longer required. And when we opened up, when the change in the law opened up the eligibility for customers to not just heating customers, oil customers, propane customers, non-utility delivered fuels still get SEEP, and we wouldn't be able to incorporate that into the matching payment program. because one, obviously the funds don't come to the utility. And then on the other side, anticipated SEEP, you could be putting the customer in a greater hole. Even if we just did it for heating customers, you could put the customer in a greater hole by saying, all right, we think this customer is going to get SEEP again, and they don't go and apply for whatever reason. And now they've been paying a lower amount for the months when now SEEP's over and they can't go and enroll.
Okay. Thanks. That makes sense. I just had two questions about the reporting requirements before I pass it over to Consumer Counsel Coleman. On slide 9 of your presentation, which I need to get to, I just had a question about the discontinuance of the monthly payment activity, which is, in the data reporting topic, it's B sub 1. Does the company report like the monthly payment activity in any other compliance filing other than this one?
You're talking slide 9?
Yep.
No.
Just so, Robin, would you mind pulling up that PowerPoint? This is helpful to have in front of us. And Dan, I know in the annual plan, we actually do, Teresa found afterwards that we do file the customers who sign up for payment plans on the web in the annual arrears management and energy affordability plan. Oh, this is a different one.
So, Attorney Wheel, so you're asking about B1 there?
Yes.
So, we report, so the way this report works, and it might help to go to slide 13, because it's the same, it kind of got cut off on that one, to save some space. So this is the same report, just the annual version of it. So we report this information for the behavior of what customers do for when they get a disconnect notice, when they get a 72, the final disconnect notice. But in the current reporting today, there's nothing in B1, 2, and 3, because those items go towards the soft termination letter, like the time between the soft termination letter, which doesn't exist, except for the one-time things, to the initial termination information. So that information can be found in like part D and F for the different timings in the termination process.
Okay. Yep, I see that. It's I guess I mean my concern, or the reason I'm asking, is just that it is useful for us to see to see the monthly data, but not necessarily monthly, if that makes sense. I mean, I understand. So as long as that data would be reported annually, but showing monthly activity, is that what the requested change would be?
That's our proposal, is to report it on a annual basis, but show you all the individual months.
Okay. And I had a similar question about slide 20. The monthly write-offs. That's obviously very helpful information for us, especially in analyzing like the RAM filings. So I did want to just ask, for that reason, actually, particularly since we do look at that when we're reviewing hardship on collectibles to try to just get a sense of trends and stuff. And we first see that hardship on collectible data in the initial RAM filing in mid-January, and then like sort of a more expansive filing in March. Would it be possible for the company to adjust that proposal for annual on January 31st to come in earlier so we can kind of compare it to that initial RAM filing? Would that be something that could work?
Are you referring to order 53?
Let's see.
I don't know if that's the right one or not.
Might even have written the wrong slide
54,
number.
slide 21, 50. 54. The first one I think is.
Yep. Yes. Sorry, that I wrote down the wrong slide number. It's whichever one you report the write-offs on.
Yeah, 54. So on this one, you're looking for in January or earlier in January? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think the initial RAM filing is January 14th or 15th, I want to say off the top of my head. So the one question I had is that if this was filed at the end of January, it would just be more helpful for us if we had it all at the same time, because we do, when that RAM filing comes in, we like to just be able to kind of cross-check, not even talking about kind of reviewing the RAM filing itself, but to understand trends like historically, or to kind of look at more specifically what write-offs looked like in the year, not to get into RAM mode, but that doesn't necessarily match what's filed in the RAM, because as we all know, there's the lag associated with under recovery and true ups and all that stuff. But just asking if it would be possible, maybe a better way to ask this question would have been, is the company kind of specifically tied to January 31st for that filing, or could that come in at the same time as or earlier than the RAM filing?
I think we'd be amenable to do that on the 15th. I don't see why not for that particular question.
And Attorney Wheel, if there is data that you are looking at, the stakeholders are looking at monthly, we're not aiming to get rid of that. It's really areas where we weren't getting questions until like the annual RAM or the annual proceeding, so that Dan and the 3 people in his team work, so we can use them for some cooler stuff that could really help customers, versus if we had just perceived that the interest and the analysis of all the data that we spend a lot of time producing, what some of it wasn't being utilized at the level that it might be being provided. But if you are using it monthly, or even note, hey, I really need it November 1, we're amenable. We just wanted to bring that up to try to maximize the value of our resources.
Not to interject here, if you'll allow me for a second. I don't know if this is helpful, but I do know that Pura staff are planning to issue a straw proposal regarding modifications to the ongoing data reporting requirements, and then we'll of course provide stakeholders an opportunity to comment. I don't have an exact date yet, but I did want to interject that into the conversation.
Thank you. That is very helpful. And that was my last question. And I know Consumer Counsel Coleman had a question. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Wheel, and good morning, commissioners, and to everyone presenting and here today. I agree this has been a helpful, productive discussion to very confusing, kind of envisioning flowcharts. But Ms. Vigras actually asked a couple of the sort of in-application questions I had. The only question I have remaining is sort of a bigger picture. Actually, I think I have 2 bigger picture questions. The first is, given that SEEP is often awarded first as an initial basic benefit, and then there are often supplemental payments that are sometimes given in the summer or fall months. I'm just wanting to confirm, would this application apply equally to basic benefit payments and supplemental payments in your minds? I guess in the company's minds.
So are you referring to the match? Would we match supplemental payments? Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Any payment that comes in would get matched.
Would get matched. Okay.
Yes, and the
Regular
same.
SEEP payment, supplemental. Yeah.
Yeah, the same on the Avangrid side. We would match all payments, regardless of who they came from.
It's I don't know the answer to the other piece of that, which is with the supplemental SEEP,
Right.
further reduce the required monthly payment amounts.
Right.
I mean, we can't go
That's
to
where it gets
0.
tricky.
And I don't know that answer.
We did
Dan,
not
do you
build
know?
for that, since you can't really, it's maybe
Count on
happening, maybe not happening. Like, I'm pretty sure this year we know it's not happening. So we didn't build anything to take that into account since it is supplemental and not an automatic given. Doesn't mean we couldn't, but
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, no, I acknowledge it's trickier that you can't plan on it. But thinking about how it could impact the match and the overall.
Yeah, but we would match it.
So-
Absolutely. It would get matched, which
Okay.
would help to reduce their arrears and may help them to complete the program as well.
Okay,
May not
thank you.
may not have any more payments.
Right.
And Ms. Coleman,
go
that
ahead,
just
Ms.
as
Kane.
background, Teresa just Washington just shared with us as well. Historically, for the old MPP, it wasn't used in that calculation of the monthly required payment amount. So any supplemental was not treated the same as the SEEP, the original award. Probably
Okay.
because the matching payment program had the 2 periods of year and the second payment would.
So it was just a reduction to the actual bill then.
The arrears, yep. It would get the arrears matching, yep.
Okay.
It's any payment made, whether it's the customer, your neighbor, or SEEP will match it. But whether it changes it did previously and currently, supplemental wouldn't. Well, previously supplemental wouldn't change your required payment amount. And it doesn't change your required payment amount today for us. It would just apply as a payment.
Okay.
Just like we have today, like with the overpayment where prepays like the current payment due and maybe the next one.
Okay, I think I get it. The next question I had was, I'm just trying to think, step back, bigger picture here. We're all trying to reconcile achieving the goals of SEEP, right, which is right now primarily a winter heating program, though we've talked about the supplemental program that can also help in the cooling season. Reconciling that with this goal of maximizing the benefits of the matching payment program and reducing arrearages. And one of the questions I was thinking through is whether the impacts might be different for different customers depending on how they heat. There was some, Mr. Trainer referenced earlier, some differences in those who heat by deliverable fuel. And I'm thinking particularly with respect to gas and electric. Have either of the companies thought about how like winter usage trends with different heating types might impact those customers who are getting SEEP and sort of I'm imagining those who have higher winter costs would see a different leveling off than those who wouldn't, but just trying to think about whether we need to take into account the different heating sources in the application of this.
I can restate your question. So.
And Jess, I could help maybe
Okay, great.
provide some clarity.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So Attorney Coleman, my apologies if I'm saying it correctly, but I think where you're getting at is like the treatment of customers, right? If you're going to have a heating customer who heats with a utility, if you include SEEP into the monthly required payment for matching payment program, they're going to naturally get a lower payment amount than a customer who, and no fault of their own, does not heat with the utility. So they're just going to have a base calculation. So there is a different treatment for those customers. They're not going to have the same across the board of what their monthly required payment will be just based on who their heating source is. So Eversource's current calculation of the program does not include, and I know the purpose of this tech session is to make the considerations for how SEEP is going to be treated, including one of those, option 1, to put it back into, like old MPP, put it back into the calculation. But the end result is If you're not heating with the utility, your calculation is the base. And though if you are heating with the utility, you're going to have a smaller payment amount. May not pay your arrears faster because you have a smaller payment amount, but I think that's where you're going, and you can
Yep.
correct me if
No,
I'm
that's
wrong.
helpful. I can kind of see that flow.
Yeah, and you may not have as big arrears either. If you're not heating with, say,
Right.
electricity, your bill is definitely not as high, therefore your payment is not as high. And hopefully your SEEP is helping you with your heating source, say it's oil.
Okay. Thanks for the input on both of those, and to everyone trying to work through this challenge.
Thank you. So let's keep going in the queue, and I believe it's Attorney Wyman next.
Good morning. Yes, good morning. Brittany Wyman with the Office of Education, Outreach, and Enforcement. I'm going to apologize for two things in advance. The first one is the questions may have been asked. I apologize. I just want to make sure I understand it. The second is I scribbled a lot of things down, and if I can't read my handwriting, it might take me a second to ask the question. So just bear with me as I go through. I'm going to start with an easy one, I think. For Eversource, for any of the options that you provided on that slide 3, when would your start date be? When would your estimated start date be? So for option 1, I think you said it was about 20 weeks. When would you anticipate starting should the authority order that be the option? Or how many weeks after the authority ordered, I should say.
Thank you, Brittany, for that question. We would have to go back based on the timing of the decision. Directed us, and if we get a feel for which way it's going, then we can pre-notify them. Then IT would have to secure the right contracted resources to work on it. And if it's in the area has deep subject matter expertise, we just have to see, are there other concurrent things that those same people are doing right now? So it depends on what the solution is and when, but it's not. It's usually within a few months, but it's never like immediate unless we got to feel like right now, like, hey, this is very likely to go forward. Then we could start pre-mobilizing the resources, but they wouldn't bring in the resources without the go on it.
Okay. Thank you. My next question, I believe I heard Ms. Russo and Mr. Trainer sort of say this way back at the beginning of their presentation about how option 3 or 4 would be more confusing for customers. Could you just explain how?
Yeah, so good question. In option, I'll start with option 4 because it's probably easier to explain. In option 4, the SEEP gets applied to the account and they get the match, and it doesn't impact any of their current near-term bills. It doesn't reduce the payment a little bit like option 1. It doesn't eliminate the next couple bills like option 2. And it just kind of applies to the account, gets put to the arrearage, and gets matched. So there's no immediate benefit. So customers could be like, well, where's my assistance? Where's my help? It didn't really help me this heating season. In option 3, it's a little bit of the same, but they get the 1 month benefit. So assuming the SEEP covers 1 month of bills, they get the 1 month benefit, but then it's still that, well, where's the rest of it? Where did it go? How is it helping me now during the winter season? So that's where we see the customer confusion happening, and the calls generating like, hey, I got my $600 in SEEP, but I still have to pay my $200 payment. So that's kind of the customer confusion that we're talking about.
Great, thank you. And for UI, I believe we're talking about option 3 or 4, and I think Ms. Rosso, you said something about not matching a SEEP payment if it wasn't also applied to their MPP calculation. I want to make sure I misunderstood that even if the SEEP payment is not being calculated in their MPP calculation, it still would get matched if it was just applied to their original. Okay, great. I think I might have misheard
no matter
you,
what. Yeah, no, it gets matched no matter what. No matter which option, it's getting matched.
Great, thank you very much.
Yep.
Okay. So I'm going to go back to might be option 1 or option 2. Actually, I don't know that yes, it needs to be option 1 or option 2. In one of the options where SEEP is calculated as a part of their calculation. Say I'm a customer and I enroll in MPP for the first time in July. And we can't get SEEP, and we wouldn't have you wouldn't have a letter from anyone saying they might get SEEP. You wouldn't have a promise letter. You wouldn't have any amount. You would not calculate SEEP in at that time, right? Since you wouldn't know.
Correct.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. Yeah. Now,
Okay.
if they're still on the program during the following season, then it would be incorporated at that time.
So with
they
the
were to get it.
roll, okay. So with the rolling 12 months that you can have a new MPP, they would start in July and then end in June. If they started July 1st, their 12 months would end in June, right? Or would you only be going to October?
It's
November?
so for Eversource, it's no longer a 12-month program. You can be finished in 2 months, or it could take you 30 months. So
Right.
we would reevaluate the customer's payment every 6 months, and then automatically on November 1st. That kind of starts the new season, so to speak. But it depends on the customer's monthly payment amount. Do they get SEEP, and what their delinquent balance is that they're matching.
Okay. And so in my original, they start in July and say they're going to go for 12 months or more. And I think you just said it with the November adjustment. If they got the commitment letter at that point or subsequent to November, you would recalculate it?
Yeah, in option 1, we would incorporate SEEP at the time we receive it. If it's November or July or January or whatever month.
And they'd get some notification that their payment changed based on SEEP?
Yes.
Okay. That might have been a lot of my questions.
And let me just interrupt real quick, Attorney Wyman. This is Teresa Washington. I think you were mentioning in that scenario, or that line of questioning, if they get a SEEP letter. So that goes back to the anticipated energy assistance being used versus actual and received in calculation at that point. So is the questioning more on if it's being known that they're going to receive it, that's back to the anticipated energy, would we use the anticipated energy to recalculate?
Thank you. I appreciate the extra clarification, because you're correct.
Okay. And I think what we're saying through this is the known receiving it applied versus
the estimate.
Okay.
Right.
All right. Just making that clarification. Thank you.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you. I also believe earlier when Ms. Dumaine was asking questions, and she had the nice slide and it had her 12-month denominator at the bottom. And I think somewhere somebody said that denominator could be different than 12. Do you recall what I'm talking about, or what I'm asking about?
Yes. And I think I came back and clarified that we always calculate it based on 12 months, regardless of how long they're going to be enrolled.
Right. So if they're 8 months,
Thank you.
I guess the way I said it was a little confusing.
No, that's why I would rather ask and not be confused then. Okay. So that one we have. Is there any reason, and this is for both companies, that you foresee outside of the decision and having these 4 options as a part of what your compliance filing was? Is there any reason you believe the MPP payment couldn't just be their monthly current charge?
Yes, because their monthly current charge varies. And especially if they're a heating customer, their monthly charge in the winter time, of course, is going to be much higher than their summer. Especially if they don't have air conditioning. There's so many variables. So the MPP is set up, like a budget, so that no matter, bill high or low, you just have that one payment. So say in the wintertime, your bill could be, I don't know, $250 a month. You still only have to pay the $120. So it's a nice average, so that people can count on every single month. I only need to pay $120, and even though their bill is $300 that month, they still only pay $120.
Okay. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, so please correct me if I understood this wrong. it'd be your position that it's better to have that balance or that budget sort of every month budget versus a risk of receiving additional arrears or occurring additional arrears?
Well, they wouldn't be. So if you take their usage, well, I shouldn't say wouldn't be. I mean, if they had a big, huge spike in usage as compared to their history, maybe. But if you take their history and based on us doing a recalculation every 6 months to see if they're using, less or more, because it, depends on the season. It depends on, whether we have a hot summer, cold winter, warm winter. It just gives them a nice balance throughout the whole time. So no matter what their bill is, higher or lower, we're looking at it every 6 months and can drop it if their usage has been, much lower than historically, and or if it's historically more, it can go up a little bit, but since you're spreading it out over this big long time period, even if it was to go out, that increment could be smaller, like only $5 or $10 versus, like I said, if all of a sudden for whatever reason your usage really goes up, to know you have to pay 120, and then if it was to vary all of a sudden one month you got to pay 300, we all know that it's like, whoa, I can't do that.
If
No,
it's helpful, Ms. Wyman, it's a very fair question, and we fully vetted this about 2 years ago. I think Ms. Long with Operation Fuel asked the question, and Miss White when she was back at EOE, because it seemed like, hey, wouldn't this be the easiest solution? We think it might be in CAE 21, but we're gonna look into that. But we fully vetted it, like we did all the estimates with stakeholders to figure out what would when it was determined like upfront how to set the monthly required payment amount. There wasn't one clean, easy answer, but that was one we both estimated and considered pros and cons on. It was a good
Great.
question. We don't remember where the costs landed, but we can search for that maybe during this session.
I would appreciate that, or let me know afterwards. I can also look. And I think that might be all of my questions. Luckily, going fourth or fifth kind of makes that go easier. So I appreciate all your help in answering my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And speaking of Miss Long, we will turn to Gannon Long.
Thank you, Chair Gillette. Can everybody hear me okay? Great. I have a few questions. I'm trying to frame them in a way that doesn't repeat what's been said and also doesn't take us down too many rabbit holes, but I appreciate everybody's patience. And I also just before starting wanted to say a word of appreciation for both companies. I've had Operation Fuel is in the middle of our busiest program season really in the history of our organization at this time. We've received over 36, probably 3,700 applications in 3 weeks for energy assistance. And I've had situations both with Jaime Soto at Avangrid last week and then with Teresa Washington of Eversource last night, where we had a client situation that we reached out and they were both extremely helpful and responsive. So I just wanted to say on the record that we appreciate that collaboration and your all's attention to our clients, our shared clients. So the first question I have is just a general question. My understanding is typically in a year, SEEP serves about 100,000 people in Connecticut, give or take. Is there an estimate of how many people the companies are expecting to receive SEEP awards who are like, how many people are we talking about that this is going to affect? Is it all 100,000? Is it maybe 60,000 or does anybody have a sense of that for either company?
So for Eversource, a typical year is about 15,000 electric customers and another 15,000 on the gas side, so 30,000 give or take on any given year. And I think we put those numbers in the energy affordability docket every year in our annual filing. So I might be a little bit off on those. It's also different in those years where supplemental energy assistance has gone to the electric utility. That brings the number for the electric side up to around 40,000 customers, 40, 45, call it. But that hasn't happened in a couple of years.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Trainer. I don't know if anybody from Avangrid has an estimate of just how many customers we're talking about for this, of MPP customers who receive SEEP in a given year?
We're trying to pull that number. I
Okay.
think if I remember correctly, it might be around the 5,000 mark for UI, and each of the two gas companies could have been around 12 to 15,000 in previous years.
Okay. So maybe not all of the SEEP customers, but certainly a good number of them, it sounds like. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Ms.
And
Long, I just want to clarify
Oh,
one thing with my response. I apologize. That's a total number of customers that receive SEEP for Eversource, not the ones that are on MPP. And I wasn't sure
okay.
which
Okay.
question you had
Yeah,
asked. If it's
yes, and
MPP,
that would be the same. Thank you, Dan. That's the same.
Okay.
I think that's
So-
enrolled or received SEEP numbers.
So that's people who receive SEEP, but they're not all on MPP. So is there a discrepancy, like, should everyone receiving SEEP be on MPP, or like how
No.
many, what's the gap that we're talking
Well,
about?
if they
As
don't have an arrears,
Background. Yeah, as background, the majority of low-income customers do not have a past due balance.
yeah, and those customers can still obviously go get SEEP, and it'll just help whatever their current bills are. It's not going to apply to their delinquent balance because it doesn't exist, and then there's no need for MPP because they don't qualify for it at that point.
Okay, that makes sense. I guess I would, and it may not be available today, but maybe this is something we can ask in an interrogatory, or if you guys have a way to, maybe you're already reporting this and you don't have, I would just be curious to see what that difference is, if it's possible to share that. The sort of related to this question, I just was wondering, I see the preference that Mr. Trainer had shared for option one, and Avangrid's doing that. So I like the trend of kind of doing the same thing for people regardless of the company. I was wondering if you all had an opportunity to get input from DSS, the community action agencies, or CAFCA to see if they had a preference on any of these options, or if there's an opportunity that folks will have to present this to those groups just to get their take and maybe some consensus around option one, it sounds like.
I don't know if any of them are attending today, but I think this tech session it's that forum.
well, plus, going through the different options and setting up MPP in different derogatories, we stated how we were going to administer this, and it had lots of questions around it. And I would think that that might have been an opportunity also to, express, as well as this technical session, what they thought of this option.
Yeah, and definitely I recognize there will be opportunities to seek stakeholder input through the formal docket process that you all more than I, but we are all sort of part of and familiar with somewhat. In my experience, DSS has limited engagement in these types of dockets. The CAAs, I've never seen any of them participate in a pure docket. I don't know if they have, and Kafka also very limited. So I wonder if there's opportunities outside of this type of proceeding, which they may probably be less familiar with, but maybe there's an opportunity to present and get. I just think that would be good to know, because these are the folks that deal with 100,000 clients every year, and how the SEEP award is, it's good for them to be in the know of how that's being applied, but also they may have opinions about which option works for them, and that may be relevant to the proceeding. So I would just see if there's an opportunity to connect with them, possibly outside, and report back, or maybe a public meeting or something like that. I think it would be valuable to have I certainly would feel, I sort of see where Mr. Trainer was going. I feel like having their support might make that an easier decision, because there's different ways to do it that are not necessarily wrong or right.
Yeah, Ms. Long, I think that's a good suggestion. I know there's the there's the LIBE board, and I know we have Jonathan Harris on that, and then the DSS, we have monthly meetings with DSS, and regularly we can ask them, and you're right, they're very slammed right now, and I think with the federal uncertainty with LIHEAP, that probably doesn't make them more available than they would have normally been, but whenever, we always value their input as well. It's a good suggestion.
Okay, thanks. I had a similar question that Consumer Counsel Coleman asked about option one, and just kind of, sometimes people get more than one seat payment in a year, so I'll just leave that, but I had that, I appreciate Ms. Coleman for bringing that up, because I think it's important as well. Okay, so this is a little bit possibly of a, well, actually, let me ask before I get into a more rabbit hole question. I don't think there's any statutory requirement about Operation Fuel assistance payments the way that there is about seat payments, other than our grants are not meant to result in a credit for the customer. But do the companies treat Operation Fuel payments the same way as they treat seat payments, or do you each treat them differently?
We would, if a customer gets an Operation Fuel payment, it would be matched the same way as a seat payment or customer payment would.
Same for Avangrid.
That's helpful. Thank you. My next question is around option 4. And I recognize this is complex and costly, so I'm not suggesting that we do this, but I wanted to know if there's any thought about, different customers with different tiers of arrearage may benefit from a different option as it was presented. I could see, for example, somebody who has $1,000 or less on their arrearage, maybe it would be helpful to get a payment that just clears that, and then they don't have to have any arrearage going forward. Whereas somebody who has, for example, a $10,000 arrearage probably is not in high hopes of paying that off in the near future and probably just needs to focus on keeping their service on more. So I could see option 1 as presented, where it impacts the customer right away on their bill affordability, that being a good option for somebody with a high past due balance. But I could also see somebody who, for example, has $1,000 past due, they might be eligible for 500 from Operation Fuel, and that would basically cancel that out. That also may not be the best option for that person, because MPP might get them a lower payment than they would otherwise have. So that's not necessarily a given, but I wonder if there's additional cost or complexity in considering, or even if it's possible that you might treat different customers with different tiers of arrearages, or maybe other different characteristics differently, or if you have to have like a one size fits all approach to doing this for both companies.
Yeah, good question. I think that would be, it's, let me just talk about the example you gave, the $1,000 customer and the $500 energy assistance payment or Operation Fuel payment. In that case, in every one of the options, that customer's balance would be eliminated, right? The $500 gets applied to the account and gets matched for the $1,000, bringing them to a zero balance. They're done. That happens in every one of the options. The only thing different in options 1 through 4 is what's their payment going forward on the MPP program. So that's really what would change. And in that example, it would eliminate the balance, so they would be done with the program. In the $10,000 example is where, all right, what does that customer need on a going forward basis to be compliant with the program for their monthly payment?
As far as level of effort, Ms. Long, this effort, I think it was like a few million dollars.
Oh, I'm sorry. I totally appreciate, your all's effort to reduce the reporting requirements, and I understand that administrative burden, as well as for folks looking through that data and not necessarily needing what you're reporting. So I appreciate that effort, and we'll look forward to seeing how that process is revised, as Chair Gillette shared her staff is looking at. In regards to HESIE and MPP, and recognizing like reporting the overlap of those two may not be the most fruitful information if you have people once every 6 years on HESIE but they're on MPP all year. But I wonder if there's any other effort to connect that information, right? Like maybe that reporting requirement isn't helpful, but does the hardship team at each company collaborate regularly with the energy efficiency team at each company? Like, what does that look like? And are there other ways, again, this may be a longer, maybe not for today, or we could pose a different way, but are there other ways to connect those dots, right? Between helping people who are on PP access energy efficiency services, and also tracking the impact of energy efficiency services that folks are receiving on their arrearage and MPP status? Like, how can we show the impact and better connect folks to those services that they're part of the reason they can't afford their bill is that they are paying in for them and not always accessing them back on the other side.
I know one thing, this is Teresa Washington, that I'll certainly offer up in the years and within the energy affordability dockets and the arrearage management on this. A couple of things that have come through, including speaking and discussing weatherization with customers on all calls, ensuring that our communication or our material used for education includes information on energy efficiency services, and most recently including, the RES or that energy storage, solar solutions, etc. So we do have, on all our letters and all our contacts and communications, encouraging and pushing energy efficiency services, because that is a method to help reduce, especially for, if customers are using more energy because they're not in a home that's efficient, right? For the tracking piece of it, and I know when we look at this annually, we do connect with our energy efficiency teams. The 6-year look back and the change to getting a home energy efficiency assessment done, changing that from 3 to 6 years. I get what you're saying. What I'm not sure what we would gain out of that, looking at it in the past 6 years, but I think any proposals, we'd certainly want to engage going forward, the energy efficiency team on this, if there's other ways or opportunities to report something that's more insightful. Not sure
Okay.
if Avangrid has anything that they'd like to add either.
The same, we would want to have that team, they're always looking for ways and to, see what can be done to help customers. They do have access to our database of, know what customers are hardship. And in the same thing that, all the information goes out to, all of our customers to, energy programs or, whatever is going on, or rebates and so on in the industry.
That's really helpful. And I appreciate that outreach and communication strategy. Also recognize that once every 6 years is kind of a while. So, maybe there's a way to start with people who are just enrolling for the first time and start there rather than start from the MPP side. I do think that would be some value probably for both sides to be able to demonstrate like an ROI, right, of the energy efficiency programs. You're kind of dealing with the same population of people. And I don't know that we have the answer today or anybody, is thinking about it, but it's something to just think about, like, how are we really tracking the impact of those programs on people? And also, how are you using that information to really market? I mean, something we've talked about in a number of different comments and opportunities is how do you segment your customers, right? Like, you have a pool of people that can't afford their bill or they're behind on their bill, but it might be different types of people. There might be different types of reasons. They have different income sources. They live in different parts of the state. They have different heating uses or cooling needs. So all of those things, you can't really lump them into one huge bucket of 100,000 people. You kind of have to drill down a little bit more specifically. And if you have customer data indicating this person hasn't accessed HESIE services for the past 5 years or 6 years or 5 years, and they're on MPP for the last 10 years, maybe it's time for us to do a special outreach to that person. That's not just, oh, you qualify because you're 60% or less SMI, but we noticed that your arrearage is this, or your usage goes up in this time. I feel like the companies have a lot of that data. I don't know how that can be used, but I would just encourage us to find more ways to connect those dots together and hopefully reach out to customers to encourage them to get enrolled in HESIE, with more specific marketing. I think there's opportunity for that, and we'll kind of keep an eye on that issue. But I really appreciate everybody's answers and your time today, and thanks for putting this presentation together.
Thank you, Ms. Long. I'd like to just respond to that as well. Just our energy efficiency partners aren't here. We know those programs are managed under DEEP and not in this docket, but they've got a tremendous amount of reporting and they do ROI on every single program they do. And I think it was just in recent years that the period of time that you could do has increased from something that was like a few years to 6 years. But our team here isn't a part of those dockets, but I know there are proceedings with DEEP where they review that every year and put it in a big, in their big plan as well. But absolutely, benefit. And in every single phone call, every single letter that we're sending, we've been ordered and required to co-market those things. So that's happened in recent years across our dockets.
Thank you. And thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Okay, I see 2 more hands in the queue, so I'm going to try to keep going so we can wrap this up before lunch break. So for now, I will turn to Attorney Roswick, please.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone, for the presentation this morning. I'm Bonnie Roswick with the Center for Children's Advocacy. I want to go back to the authority's question about what happens to customers who fall off of MPP, and maybe it's my need for additional understanding of how that all works. So the customer receives the SEEP award. That SEEP award is matched or goes towards the arrearage. However, in several of the scenarios, there is a discount on the monthly payment. So I think in the earlier options, it was, or examples, it was $20, et cetera, which impacts the amount of money that the customer has to pay. So is that money part of the SEEP award that goes to the company? So, and then what happens if the customer stops paying, but the company still has that SEEP award? So what happens to that money in terms of the benefit to the customer?
So the way it works, so in every one of the options, every one of the 4 options, the SEEP gets applied to the customer in full as soon as the cash comes in the door. And at that time, it's matched. Where the options differ is what's the customer's requirement to pay going forward? Is it the same $200 they're required to pay, like option 4? Do they get a 1-month break in option 3? In option 2, do they get a 3-month break? In option 1, is it that payment reduced by the $20, $25 a month when it's divided over 12 months? In either of those options, it's just changing the requirement of the monthly payment and how that's treated. But in every case, the customer gets the full benefit of SEEP at the time it posts, and then the match comes simultaneously to that.
And so the SEEP award, but there's 2 pieces to it. There's the award itself and then the match. So if the customer if that benefit is applied on a monthly basis, that is still part of that benefit. So I guess my question, and maybe I'm viewing it incorrectly, but there continues to be that monthly benefit going forward, which is amortized, over the year or however many months of that the SEEP award goes towards. So again, what happens to that other half of the benefit if the customer falls off?
It's already been applied to their account. The SEEP award isn't amortized. It's essentially giving the customer an additional discount on their payment, but they get it all up. The payment itself is posted up front. They're not getting $25 additional a month applied to their account. The $600 is posted the day we get it, and it's the match the day we get it. But the treatment of the customer's required payment to remain compliant with the program is discounted by the $25 in the examples we were looking at.
And if we could, Ms. Robin, if you wouldn't mind, I think we're not seeing the PowerPoint. I think since the other PowerPoint came in. Nobody's seeing the PowerPoint. Ms. Attorney Roswick, I think that, yeah, what Dan is saying, so immediately we receive $500 for a customer for SEEP, that immediately gets posted to their account and matched. And the match comes off of, it eliminates that portion, that $500 of their past due balance. And that's completely separate from what is the customer's required monthly payment amount. And that's the big discussion we're having today with the scenarios. Should that monthly required payment amount calculation reduce the amount for the next 12 months or something based on receipt of SEEP? Or should the monthly required payment amount stay the same, but receipt of SEEP would just basically prepay their next few months, their next few payments? But we always give the SEEP match, both we and Avangrid, the SEEP. Upon receipt, we apply it and match it immediately. So no matter when they fail out, they've already gotten the match, the night after we receive it. The night we receive it.
Okay, thank you for your response. I also, what we haven't talked about is when whatever plan is decided on, how we're communicating this to the customers and how the monthly bill is going to reflect any of this, which is, we've talked about the confusion factor, but what are the modifications on the bill? And then there'll obviously be cost to that. And will you wait to do that until a final plan is determined?
I can take that one, Dan. Thank you, Attorney Roswick, for that question. So in the project that completed and was implemented November 1, that's when that was implemented, the front page of the bill for electric customers, because that front page of the electric bill was redesigned maybe 2.5 years ago. That front page for the electric bill will prominently displays the required monthly payment amount already. And so that was vetted a few years ago with and so that was implemented. So now new MPP, that previously didn't happen with MPP. It only happens with New Start for Eversource. On the gas side, the gas bill has not been redesigned. So for gas customers, they need to rely on the welcome letters and everything we already filed in the annual plan that was reviewed and approved this year. I think some point in the future, the gas bill effort with a gas redesign project effort is probably also a good idea in Connecticut. That's a huge effort for both of our companies, like it was on the electric side, and that hasn't been pursued. I haven't seen in the regulatory area.
Thank you for your response. I don't have any more questions.
Great.
Thank you so much. And last but not least, Dr. Mitchell, please.
Hi, I'm Dr. Mark Mitchell. I am here. I'll be working with the Nonprofit Accountability Group, and this is my first meeting. So I have a bunch of questions, but most of them I will take offline. But I particularly wanted to know about, you talked about the outbound calling campaign, and you said that that's being ceased because of the scamming risk. And so I wanted to find out what specifically, what kind of scams are you seeing that are confusing people about the calling? So yeah.
Sure, I can take first pass of that, but our Eversource belongs to the United Utilities Against Scammers, UAS, and it is across the whole industry, and not just our industry, but outside that industry. We have found an increasing number of scammers pretending to be utility, phishing customers in, and then asking them to pay with gift cards, after asking them to telling them that we're going to disconnect their power immediately if they don't make payment. Those are probably the two biggest we see. And so we've spoken at the legislature about just, instead of reaching out via robocalling, use letters and email to reach people. And if you have to robocall, like for also with the Telecommunications Protections Act and the declaratory ruling about what utilities are able to use it for, we're allowed to use it for. when customers could be eligible for a benefit for financial hardship customers. So we have used that in targeted ways. However, we don't find it effective or a positive customer experience, and we know that it causes a higher risk of scams. And I think the Attorney General's office in Connecticut has also pushed back in. There's no perfect answer for texts as well. Text scams have really increased as well. So it's if it's super time sensitive, like a power outage or imminent disconnect, if it's related to that, your service, that makes sense. Otherwise, generally, Eversource is not a supporter of that for our customer experience.
Okay. Okay. Well, but I didn't know that you're still reaching out by letter
Yes.
and email. Okay, so that's good. So on another issue, I know that it's been approved for the 5-step LiDAR payment, but people aren't receiving that yet. Can you tell me when that goes into effect?
Yep, the 5-tier electric low-income discount rate, we're waiting for a final decision from Pura on March 19th. I believe it's, yeah. And so after that, then we were ready to implement it a few Mondays ago. So now we're just waiting for that clarification. And some customers, so currently we have the 2-tier with customers on a 50% or a 10%. And a piece of that too is trying to time it with our partners at the Department of Social Services who are currently providing data matching for the 2 tiers, and in the future they'll be providing the 5 tiers. We believe that they're still on track for late May, and they're also doing some analysis on a discount rate for the gas side and what that data would look like. But that's further along for later. Hopefully that helps.
And for Avangrid, we we're building ours, and it's going to take 18 months, and we're combining that build with the approval for the gas to get 10%.
Okay, so it'll be 18 months from the time that it's
From
approved.
February, we got
Okay.
that approval, yes, this month.
Okay. Thank you for that information. Now, will that be automatic? You talked about, so it'll be matched automatically with the DSS information, and so people don't have to apply or show income.
Very good question, Dr. Mitchell.
Yes.
So Connecticut is the second state in the nation to do data matching with the state, and with Pura's support and approval and OCC's leadership, that was implemented for the first time about 1.5 years ago. What DSS is building and should be ready, they think by the end of May, is to provide us the data in the 5 tiers for those customers that they have. So for Eversource, that's about 150,000 of our 200,000-ish customers on the discount rate. So that they'll provide them, and they provided the analysis, kind of like where Ms. Long was speaking to before. DSS is the expert in this, so we had them provide the analysis, and they gave the recommendations on how to use categorical eligibility. So in the monthly feed we will put customers in the discount rate tier that DSS tells us, and they'll stay at that tier in a normal year for at least a year. They can go up by providing proof of household income to get a higher discount, but they won't go down. We have 50,000 customers who are not coming through the Department of Social Services data matching, and those customers have enrolled through their community action agency or directly through us by providing their proof of financial hardship. And for those customers as well, as soon as we process and we're within like 2 business days of when we receive that household income, that once we process, immediately that night, the customer goes on the discount rate. So there's no delay. As soon as I tag you with a financial hardship, it's a concurrent identification of the tier and your financial hardship. And then your service is protected for the winter moratorium, and you're eligible for the programs like HESI and some of the solar programs as well.
Great, thank you. That's very helpful. And then my last question is, is the Pura staff presentation that was given today, is that available or will it be posted on the website?
Thank you so much, Dr. Mitchell. We will make sure that that's posted as correspondence in the docket if it's not already.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, I believe that concludes the agenda for today. So I just want to cover a couple of next steps. I mentioned the forthcoming comment opportunity earlier, and I believe we have 2 additional comment opportunities coming up that I want to make sure are on people's radars. So give me just one moment to pull these dates up. Coming up in this docket, we have written comment opportunities due on March 6th regarding medical protection practices. We also have written comments due on March 10th regarding the application of SEEP awards to monthly MPP payments. And then there will be the 3rd written comment opportunity coming up regarding the staff straw proposal on the data requirement orders. So please keep your eyes out for that. I believe that brings us to the end of today's agenda. So I want to thank our presenters for their presentation and for answering the authority and stakeholder questions. Unless there's anything further, I believe we can adjourn and wish everyone a good rest of the day and a great weekend. Thank you.
Thank you.